Yo! Don't think, just solve. Max Spark. If you're a cuber, these words are probably pretty familiar to you. But what does he mean with that? We cubers have very big brains, of course we need to think while solving. I mean, or do we? Well, in this video, I will talk about what's going on in our heads and how we can use this information to boost our learning process, and why Max Spark has got a point when he says that we don't think, we just solve. So let's find out what's going on in our head while we cube. You get it, CubeHead, like the channel name? I mean, anyways, let's get to the video. To try to explain this, let's start off with this cube. Looks like a pretty normal cube, right? But what if I show it from this side? Well, it still looks like a normal cube. But watch what happens when I start moving it around. Like, most people will still think this is a normal cube, but us cubers notice something. And that is that the color scheme is off. We are used to a color scheme where yellow is opposite to white, blue to green, and orange to red. But they're next to each other on this cube. But apart from the colors, this cube is essentially just the same as any other cube. And we would solve it exactly the same as we would solve a normal cube. However, if we try to solve this cube as fast as we can, we will quickly find out that the change in color scheme makes an immense impact on the times we get. Why is it that solving a cube with an unfamiliar color scheme is so much more difficult to do? It's because we suddenly have to think about things we usually don't have to think about. We changed a habit of ours. For example, if I show you this PLL on this peculiar cube, as a cuber you would probably be pretty confused at first, because it's a pattern you normally never get. It's only after you figure out that the edges need to swap with the opposite edges that you know it is something we call an H-berm. Now if I show you an H-berm again on a normal cube, we can immediately tell it is one, without much thought, right? I mean, if you think about it, you know that the edges need to swap with the opposite edges, but we don't need to know that, because we have trained our mind to do an H-berm once we see this checkerboard pattern. I mean, it's not really a checkerboard pattern, right? The checkerboard has 2 colors and this has 4 colors, but it's like a checkerboard on each side of the cube, if that makes sense. Or am I overthinking it now? Anyway, seeing this double different color checkerboard pattern is a trigger that makes us do the algorithm without much thinking. But talking about the algorithm, you don't think about doing every move either, right? When you initially learned the alg, you probably had to tell yourself something like middle, once, middle, twice, middle, once, middle. But after doing it a lot of times, the alg suddenly fires out of your fingers without much thinking. But why is that? Why is it that we don't think of any of those things? It's because we're doing these things subconsciously. When we solve a cube really fast, we use something called implicit memory. It is memory that we're not conscious about. More precisely, we use a form of implicit memory called procedural memory. But you might know it by the name of muscle memory. It is the same type of memory used to type on a keyboard, to write something down with a pen, to ride a bicycle, or, if you're really fast, to solve a Rubik's Cube. I'll try to explain how it works. When you do something really often, you constantly send the same signals to your brain. And in the beginning, these take a lot of effort. Think about how difficult your first time biking was, or your first time typing on a keyboard. It wasn't fluent, but after doing it so many times, the roots to your brain become stronger. And slowly all the relevant neural systems work together to automatically produce what you're trying to do, until the point that you don't even have to think about it anymore. It is even so that trying to think of things that are in your procedural memory can actually slow you down. I mean, I think it has happened to all of us when we try to show a PLL or an algorithm to a friend of ours and we suddenly don't remember how we do it. It can be hard to grasp, but I like to compare it with learning a foreign language. At first, it takes a lot of mental power to recall the vocabulary and applying the grammar. But after a lot of time and practice and actually speaking the language, you start to get more comfortable with everything until the point that you can speak the language without much thinking. And that's the same thing with cubing. Initially solving a Rubik's Cube is a really difficult task. I think everyone can agree on that. And learning the techniques and algorithms, etc. take a lot of mental energy. But because of repetition and practice, you train your brain so that you can eventually do these things subconsciously. And that explains why we're able to do it so fast as well. Because the subconscious mind is way faster than the conscious mind is. And there's another advantage with doing these things subconsciously as well. Because solving cases like an F12 pair or something like that demands less cognitive power, our mind is actually free to focus on other things while turning. For example, keeping track of the moving pieces, something we call look ahead. You can compare it to trained football players, who instead of keeping track of their feet and the ball all the time, can instead focus on the game and the position of the defensive players instead. Now that you know all of this, you'll quickly realize that building this muscle memory is a crucial part of getting fast at speed cubing. But how do we create it? And how long does it take to create this muscle memory? Well, according to Fitt's 3 stages of motor learning, it all starts in the first phase, which is the cognitive stage. And as the name implies, this is a stage where you learn new things. Think of watching tutorials and example solves on YouTube, or learning new algorithms, or whatever you're trying to do with the cube. Then once you apply these techniques to your cube, we go to the second stage, which is the associative stage. During this stage, you actually turn the cube, you solve it, you apply the techniques that you learned on the cube, and you'll start to see patterns over time, and things will go easier, because this is a stage where you actually train your mind to build muscle memory. And after a lot of practice, you eventually end in the autonomous stage. This is a stage where you can actually start doing things without really having to think about them. Now, why did I explain these 3 stages? Well, it's important to know that for each new thing you learn, you go through all the aforementioned stages. It's also important to know that the rate in which you build muscle memory has a few important factors. And the first one being difficulty. Some algorithms or cases are way more difficult than others. Maybe the alg you're trying to learn is super long or completely different than anything else you've learned before. The more difficult something is, the longer it will take to build this muscle memory. And the second important factor is the rate in which you get a case. Every time you get a case in a solve is an opportunity to build better memory for it. But as you can imagine, you get some cases way more than other cases. Try, for example, comparing an OLL algorithm versus a ZBLL or something like that. The less you get a case, the longer it will take to build the muscle memory. And that makes sense, of course, because you have fewer opportunities to build muscle memory. But this also means that the more you practice, the more you will get a case, obviously, the faster you will develop this muscle memory. Why do you think Max Park doesn't have to think anymore? He doesn't need to. And lastly, and maybe the most important factor of all of them, is genetics. Some people will just simply learn things faster than others, but don't let it discourage you. Understanding a Rubik's Cube is hard for everyone at first, but eventually there will be a point where you get a grasp of it and you start improving. Maybe you will not progress as fast as someone else, but anyone is able to get really fast at solving a Rubik's Cube. Trust me on this one, I know pretty stupid people that are really fast with a cube. Now, of course, there is way more happening in your head than the things I just explained. The information I shared with you is really simplified, but I think this might give you a really good overall idea of how the mind of a cuber works. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, yo CubeHead, it's all cool and stuff that I know how the mind of a cuber works, but what the heck is in it for me? Well, with this information, you can actually deduce some important fundamentals. I'll give you a few. Be careful with your habits. It's really important that you can spot and fix your bad habits as soon as possible. This might even be the most important thing you get out of this video. Every time you do something in a solve that is not efficient, requires too many rotation, or is just wrong, take some time to figure out what a better way is to solve the certain thing you're trying to do. And implement the right way the next time you can. Because every time you make a mistake in a solve and don't fix it, there is a higher chance that you will make the exact same mistake again, because as you know, you are training your mind to do so. The second one is use trainer tools. As I have said before, the more you get a certain case in a solve, the easier it will be to create muscle memory for that case. But you can also force yourself to get cases more often with alg trainers. I would really suggest you doing so because it speeds up the process so much. And the last one is be patient. Brody was right when he said that perseverance may be the most important factor in improving as a cuber. I know some things are really difficult to grasp or to memorize, but keep doing it, because eventually there will come a time where you don't have to think about it anymore. So if after this video you're just casually cubing and someone comes up to you and asks, "Damn bro, how can you think so fast? You must be super genius." You could simply answer with, "Well, to be honest, I don't think that much. It is all subconscious since I spent hours upon hours twisting this cube." Although that would be accurate, you will sound like a total idiot. So I would avoid saying that. Instead, try to reply something like, "Yeah man, you're right. I'm even so smart that I don't even think about it."